you will. On the day of resurrection, Allah actually turns our faith into real, actual light. And we all have to take a walk on Judgment Day after our judgments are done. We have to take a walk towards our final destinations, either heaven or hell. And there are people who had faith with them, which is nurun yas'a bayna aydihim wa bi aymanihim. There are two kinds of light that are going to aid us on that day when there's complete darkness. The light is going to be coming out of our chests, and there's another light that's going to be coming out of our right hands. That's what the Quran describes on a couple of occasions. That light is supposed to help you navigate through this difficult path so you and I can make it to the gates of heaven. That's the point of it. Okay? Now, why are there two kinds of light? One of those lights has to do with your sincerity to Allah and the genuineness of your faith. That's inside of your heart. Only you know that and Allah knows that. Nobody else can check it. The other light, as I mentioned, comes from your right hand. And that light is actually a representation of the things you and I did in this life. If you had good deeds to do, if you did good works, then those works are going to get converted into light on that day. So you've got these couple of torches on Judgment Day that are helping you navigate, that are helping you move forward, right? And at the end of the day, all of this conversation it's only got one purpose. You and I want to stand up on that day and we want to have some light on our hands. We want to be able to access that light so we can make our way to Jannah. Our Messenger ﷺ would describe that light on Judgment Day that we're going to be raised with is not all the same for everybody. It's not all the same. There are some people who barely have enough light, they can barely see their feet as they walk. That's how much light they have. There are those who have so much light that they can see it's as though that you can see from one city to the next one. That's how much light you have. And that depends on the strength and the purity of our faith and the strength of the deeds we left behind, doesn't it? And so that's the reason the parable of light is important. This was not the subject of my khutbah. I just wanted to set the stage. Allah wanted us to understand the concept of light and how we have to preserve that light in ourselves. And we have to ensure that that investment is maintained and not killed before we make it before Allah on Judgment Day. Right now you won't notice it, but on that day everybody's going to be wishing they have it. Now, these two parables that I wanted to share with you, these examples that I wanted to share with you, are actually not about light. They're about darkness. They're at the end, the two tragic cases of people who are not going to have light or who don't take advantage of the light that they have. And so I'll go through them one by one. Allah describes وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَعْمَالُهُمْ كَسَرَابٍ بِقِيعَةٍ يَحْسَبُهُ الظَّمْآنُ مَاءً. Allah says, as for those who've disbelieved, which can also be translated those who've buried away, meaning buried their light away. That's one of the other ways you can think of the word kufr. Anyway, those who've denied and have been ungrateful and have buried their light away, what about them? Well, they are like somebody traveling in the middle of the day in a desert and they see a sarab, which means a mirage. So a man is thirsty, a woman is thirsty, lost in the desert, and they're trying to find a place to survive. And of course, in the hot sun, you start seeing waves where there are no waves. Things get a little watery looking in the distance, and that's a mirage. And because you're dying of thirst, you think that's worth something. And so يَحْسَبُهُ الظَّمْآنُ مَاءً, the desperately thirsty one runs towards that water, thinking that it's water. حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَهُ, until the point where he reaches it. لَمْ يَجِدْهُ شَيْئًا, he found nothing there. It was just sand. It was a false image. فَوَفَّاهُ حِسَابَهُ وَاللَّهُ سَرِيعُ الْحِسَابِ. So Allah, and he will only find Allah there. He was looking for water and Allah makes a strange turn in the example. He says instead of finding water there, he will find his master there. فَوَجَدَ اللَّهَ عِنْدَهُ فَوَفَّاهُ حِسَابَهُ. He'll find Allah there and Allah will complete his account there. Allah will give him what he deserves. Wallahu sari'ul hisab, and Allah is quick in taking the audit. Allah is quick in taking account of all the things you and I did. That's the first example. I haven't explained it yet. I just want you to know what it is first. Now quickly the second example. Oh, another example. And this is going to be almost the opposite scene. First time we were in the desert, now we're going to be in the ocean. He says, كَظُلُمَاتٍ فِي بَحْرٍ. It's like layers on top of layers on top of layers of darkness out at sea. So we're not talking about the daytime now. We're talking about the nighttime. In the first example, it was clearly daytime because you don't see a mirage at night, you only see it in the day. And now you're out at sea and you're covered in layers of darkness And then he says, في ظلمات في بحر لجي. Lujji means an ocean that is not merciful, that won't let up. Like the waves are getting violent and you're hoping it was just one bad wave and then things are going to calm down. But no, the waves keep getting worse and worse and worse. Until يغشاه موج من فوقه. A wave overtakes him. A wave is so huge out in the middle of sea that it crushes whatever vessel he's in, whatever boat or ship that he's in. It's now underwater. And then min fawqihi mawj. On top of that wave that's already slammed you into the water is another wave throwing you deeper inside. Min fawqihi sahab. And on top of that there are thunderstorm clouds. In other words, when the clouds are there, that's an indication a storm is coming, right? People that are experienced at being out at sea, they can see the clouds and know, we got to get ready, things are about to get ugly. So Allah says that the waves are relentless and the storm's not letting up either. And this person, whoever they were, that poor soul, is being now drowned into the depths of the sea, in the middle of the darkness. And at the end of that parable, what does he say? إِذَا أَخْرَجَ يَدَهُ لَمْ يَكَدْ يَرَاهَا. You're all the way at the bottom of the sea, you can't even try and get up. You try to get up, another wave comes and slams you down. That's the problem. You could try to swim your way off, but there's another wave on top. And so he says, he's so much lost in the dark that when he takes his hand out, لَمْ يَكَدْ يَرَاهَا, it's almost as if he can't even see his own hand. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَجْعَلِ اللَّهُ لَهُ نُورًا فَمَا لَهُ مِن نُور. Whoever Allah didn't give light to, how can they have any light? Whoever Allah didn't furnish any light, how could they have any light? So these, like I said in the beginning, these examples can be confusing. You might say, what does he mean by all of this? But I first wanted to kind of paint this scene for you, these two parables, these two examples, and what they mean in brief translation. Now let's try to dig a little deeper and appreciate what's being said. Basically, in both of these cases, a person is not seeing what they're supposed to. One person's in the middle of day, it's bright outside, and yet they see things that aren't there. They see a mirage, don't they? Which is as good as being blind. You might as well be in the dark because it's not there. What you see isn't there. And in the other case, somebody's in the dark, they're at sea, there's not even moonlight because it's covered by the clouds, there's these waves, you're blind in another way. These are both sides of blindness. But why give two different sides of blindness? Because Allah is describing that on Judgment Day, people are going to come before Him that are, the unfortunate cases are going to be of two kinds. There are going to be two kinds of unfortunate cases. So here's where I'd like for you to pay extra attention, to understand what is going on in these parables. There are people who assume that they are in light. There are people that are like that person out in the desert, surrounded by light. You can't get brighter than the desert in the daytime. So there are people that are in a good environment. They act religiously. They look religious. They talk religious. Their family's religious. Their community's religious. They're involved in the religious sense. They're involved at the masjid. So everything around them, they're not drinking alcohol. They're not in the party scene. They're not at the club. They're not in that scene. They're in a religious setting. They're in a spiritual setting. They're surrounded by light. And a lot of times we assume that people like that are straight one-way ticket to heaven. They're good. They've made it. They've got no issues. But unfortunately, even when you're surrounded by that much light, you know what happens sometimes? You start becoming delusional. You start thinking that the appearance of looking religious, the words that you use that make you sound like you're religious, the outside of your being committed to the faith, you look like you're pretty enlightened, doesn't actually say anything about what's going on the inside. There could be two very different realities. We have, unfortunately, in the Muslim world, this is something Allah comments exhaustively on in the Quran. I'll just oversimplify it for now. Basically what happens is you have people that look very spiritual, very enlightened, very religious, very committed to the faith on the outside. And they commit to those things that make them look that way. So clothing becomes very important. Appearance becomes very important. Pronouncing certain utterances becomes very important. All the things that other people can perceive become important. But there's something going on inside of you like greed, like jealousy, like pride, like anger, like hatred. You can't see somebody else succeed, it bothers you. You don't feel even a little bit of sympathy when you're being ruthless to children in the family. You don't consider the people whose rights you're taking away because it's all personal, nobody's going to find out. You don't see it because it's not in front of people, so it doesn't matter. What is in front of people needs to look pristine. And what's going on inside is ugly. It's dark. And these people assume that because they're doing good things, they're volunteering, they even grew out a beard, they put the hijab on, they even memorized some Quran, they worked on their tajweed, all the outside stuff is pretty good. They start assuming also that Allah is going to really reward me for all of this. I'm doing pretty good. As opposed to this other person who can't even recite the Fatiha, as opposed to that other person who can't even do this X, Y, or Z. They don't even pray in the masjid or whatever else. You start comparing yourself thinking you're doing pretty good because you're in the light. And that, by the way, that sense of superiority is probably the worst of all of the other vices I mentioned. When you start thinking and I start thinking that I stand in a better place than another human being before Allah, that pride is actually a replica of the pride of the devil. Why did he say, I'm superior? You know, the sense of superiority, you know, تِلْكَ الدَّارُ الْآخِرَةِ نَجْعَلُهَا لِلَّذِينَ لَا يُرِيدُونَ عُلُوًّا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فَسَادًا وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. I'm being asked to move all of you forward, so move forward as much as you can. Allah says that next home that He built, heaven, He made it for people who don't want to feel superior in this earth. They don't have a desire for ulu. They don't want to make themselves feel or give the impression that somebody else is little compared to them, lesser compared to them. They don't want that. And there are sometimes among us, maybe ourselves, because of our religious knowledge, because of our religious position, because of our religious perception of others, we do start thinking we're better than somebody else. We do become condescending towards others. This is the first example. People who actually think they're in light and they're doing good. But you're like a person in the desert. You're going to die of dehydration. And when you get there, what you think is water, meaning you think you're going to go to heaven and be replenished for all the deeds you did, all you find there is Allah who says, actually, you did everything else on the outside, but there was no light inside of you. That you don't get anything here. Allah is going to quickly take your account. You and I have to become people of introspection. Whether or not people praise you and me means nothing. As a matter of fact, whether or not people criticize you and me also means nothing. You have to be able to ask yourself, if Allah was to ask me right now what I'm doing is right or wrong, am I able to answer Him? Am I doing right by Allah? Because He's the only one I'm going to be meeting at the end of that journey. On the other side of it, there's another darkness. There's another failed scenario. One of them was people who thought they're doing good and they get there and they find nothing. But the other one is a completely different scenario. And the other one is a scenario of someone, like I mentioned, in the dark. And then they're even pushed into more darkness, and then more darkness, and they just keep going deeper and deeper. This is actually someone who's not in a good environment. This is someone who's not involved with anybody. They're not even around people who have strong faith. As a matter of fact, all the friends they have make them even a worse person. They instill even worse habits in them. And the environments they put themselves in, the situations they put themselves in, are pure evil. They're pure darkness. But they're addictive also. They keep going to that stuff. They go to those environments, they go to those friends, they go to those dark places, and they can't even help themselves go back over and over and over and over again. They form all forms of addictions to certain kinds of behavior, they form addictions to substances, and they can't let go of that entire scene. And what does Allah describe as these waves are coming and slamming you down and you're all the way in the depths of the darkness? The powerful thing here in this parable is Allah actually gave hope to those people too. He didn't say when he's at the bottom of the sea, he can't even see his hand. He said he could almost not see his hand, right? Your hand is a representation of what you do. Even in the depths of darkness, you could still kind of sort of see your hand. You know what that means? You still have some sense that this is wrong. What I'm doing is wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. I know better. I know I need to change. I'm humiliated by what I'm doing. I'm giving into something inside me that's very animal. I'm giving into something inside me that overtakes me, and I lose my connection with Allah. And every time I dive in, that connection gets hurt more and more and more and more. But every time it gets hurt, there's less and less light. But there's still a tiny bit of light left inside you that still lets you see. You know, to help you understand this part better, our eyes are useless without light. If there are no light sound inside this room, and there are no windows, and there's absolutely no light, we are completely blind. Your eyes could be functioning perfectly, but there's no point. You're blind anyway because you are in the darkness. Allah is describing here, when you're in the bottom of the sea, when you're way down there, clearly there's no source of light, is there? I mean, it's already dark, it's already night, there are already clouds in the sky, and you're way deep down inside in the middle of the night. There should be zero light. You shouldn't say, I can almost see my hand. You should not be able to see your hand at all. The point is, you shouldn't be able to see your hand at all. But Allah is saying there's some light somewhere. The question then arises, where is that light? That's actually the light Allah put inside you, and Allah put inside me, inside of our hearts. He put it there. It's not some outside light, it's inside you. And it's using that, and it's being dimmed away. It's weakened. It's been covered by a lot of darkness. But it's still enough for you to see somewhat that you're doing something wrong. There's still hope in you. That light Allah does not let die. Imagine, back in the day, what is light at nighttime? How do you have a light? You have a lamp. You have a candle. That's how lights used to work. Once you take that candle underwater, what's going to happen immediately? It's going to blow out. There's not going to be any source of light. But somehow, this source of light in the depth of the ocean is protected. Even though it's in such a bad environment, it's still protected. It's been weakened, but it hasn't been suffocated. It didn't blow out. It didn't get washed away. That's the light that Allah protected inside you and inside of me, no matter how far gone you think you are and how far gone I think I am. Mistakes happen. Sins happen. Crimes against Allah happen. Our hearts go in bad places, in dark directions. Our hands go in dark directions. We've made mistakes. But Allah's mercy, what does He say at the end? وَمَنْ لَمْ يَجْعَلِ اللَّهُ لَهُ نُورًا فَمَا لَهُ مِن نُورٍ. And for somebody who Allah wouldn't have provided them light, where would they have gotten light from? How could they have gotten any light if Allah didn't provide it? What is Allah saying here? Can you imagine where can light possibly come from in the middle of the ocean at the bottom? Where would it come from? Where do you think that light came from, if not from me? Allah is telling you and me, we give up on Him, He doesn't give up on us. We let Him go, He doesn't let us go. He keeps the hope alive. He lets us, the ability for you to even feel bad, somewhat, you drown that voice out. You hear it and you say, nah, I don't want to listen to this. I'm already in line to get into the club. I'm like the third person left before the entry. And now my conscience is kicking in and saying, you need to turn around and go. You shouldn't be doing this. That voice inside you is that little bit of light left. And you could suffocate at that time too, and then next time too, and then next time too. But there's a limit. And that's what I wanted to finally share with you. There is actually a limit. It's not limitless. It's not like Allah will keep your light alive at any cost. Allah will mention people who are dead already. They're dead already. They have no light left inside them. Allah will mention people whose hearts have turned into stone. And if your heart is stone, that means if there's light inside it, it can't get out. Right? It's dead. There's no way it can get out. What happens to those people? When they suffocate themselves, knowingly they suffocate the light inside of themselves, what happens to them? Allah says, وَزَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُم. That's the last thing I want to share with you. When that happens, how do you know that's happened to you? You will know that's happened to you when those things that are evil, that even though they're attractive, and they're tempting, and you're drawn to them, there's still some part of you that feels bad, right? When that's gone, and it only looks beautiful, you justify it to yourself. Not only forget that it's one thing to say, I know it's bad, I know I'm messed up, but I still do it. I need to stop. That's one thing. That means you still have some light left. At least you recognize that it's what? Bad. But when the light is completely gone, then it's زَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُم. You don't see it as bad anymore. Now that's amazing. What do you mean it's bad? We're having a good time. What do you mean it's bad? You don't want me to live my life? What do you mean it's bad? That's awesome. That's like the reason we're alive. Your definition changes. You're no longer guilty. You don't even feel bad. You're actually now glorifying the sin that you're engaged in. You're glorifying the darkness. That's become beautiful to you. And that's when, instead of the definition of beauty and ugliness coming from Allah, based on the light that He gave you, now those definitions come to you from shaitan. Now that's a lost cause. That's beyond hope, you know? And I pray Allah never lets us fall into that. You know, sometimes there may be you and I may be doing something evil, and there is something called a defense mechanism, right? It just kicks in. Somebody calls you out on it, or your own conscience calls you out on it, and you start rationalizing it to yourself. No, it's not that bad. I mean, it's messed up, but it's not that messed up. I mean, come on, I was in a tough situation. Well, what do you expect me to do? And we justify to ourselves, right? But deep down inside, you also know that you're lying to yourself. At least you know you're just trying to cope with having to live with the decision you've made or the sin that you're engaged in. But you don't even believe your own argument, actually. You don't even believe it yourself. That is, at the end of the day, the most precious thing Allah gave us, is that light. You know, I told you that's the last thing. Since I have a minute, I'll throw one last thing in. You know what the Quran is called in the Quran? فَآمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَالنُّورِ الَّذِي أَنزَلْنَا. Believe in Allah and His Messenger and the light that we sent down. Allah calls the Quran light. It's not an accident. He calls it light because my engagement with Allah's words, that's Allah talking to me. It's not just a book. It's not just something I recite. It's Allah talking to me. When Allah talks to me, then that light inside me gets stronger. Because that itself is light. Those words themselves are light from Allah Azza wa Jal. My iman will be restored. My vision for what is right and wrong will be restored again when I keep coming back to Allah's book and keep coming back to Allah's book. But that coming back to Allah's book cannot be artificial. It can't just be that I recite it and I put it down. It can't just be that I read its translation to argue with my friends about what this verse means or that verse means. It can't be for that. It has to be, Ya Allah, I need light for myself. Give me light in your words. That's the humble, begging attitude of a slave with which I must come to the word of Allah. Even the word of Allah, subhanAllah, it's the word that's supposed to make me humble. Today, you and I approach it as something as a tool for argument. Or we study it as something interesting. Or we study it as a casual pastime. We don't think of it as a lifeline. We don't think of it, this is me, this is Allah talking to me. This is Allah giving me value, addressing me, a letter, what He calls risalati Rabbi, letters from my master. Literally, messages, letters from my master. Like, when somebody writes you a personal note and you're like, wow, they took the time? That's Allah to you in the Quran. And if you can develop that, then that light will not become weak. Allah will not let it become weak. May Allah Azza wa Jal connect us deeply, our hearts, with the Quran and maintain that source of light for us. May Allah Azza wa Jal strengthen the light in our hearts no matter how weak it